Now perhaps you can understand why I never told this story before. It's not just the embarrassment of tears. That's part of it, no doubt, but what embarrasses me much more, and always will, is the paralysis that took my heart. A moral freeze. I couldn't decide, I couldn't act, I couldn't comport myself even in a pretense of modest human dignity. All I could do was cry. Quietly, not bawling, just chest chokes. At the rear of the boat, Elroy Beardall pretended not to notice. He held a fishing rod in his hand, his head bowed to hide his eyes. He kept humming a soft, monotonous little tune. Everywhere, it seemed, in the trees, the water, and the sky, a great world-wide sadness came pressing down on me, a crushing sorrow like I had never known it before. And what is so sad, I realized, was that Canada had become a pitiful fantasy, silly and hopeless. It was no longer a possibility. Right then, with the shore so close, I understood that I would not do what I should do. I would not swim away from my hometown and my country and my life. I would not be brave. The old image of myself as a hero, as a man of conscience and courage, all that was just a threadbare pipe dream, bobbing there in the rainy river. Looking back at the Minnesota shore, I felt a sudden swell of helplessness come over me, a drowning sensation, as if I had toppled overboard and was being swept away by the silent waves. Chunks of my own history flashed by. I saw a 7-year-old boy in a white cowboy hat and a Lone Ranger mask and a pair of holstered six-shooters. I saw a 12-year-old Little League shortstop pivoting to turn double play. I saw a 16-year-old kid decked out for his first prom, looking spiffy in a white tux and a black bow tie, his hair cut short and flat, his shoes freshly polished. My whole life seemed to have spilled out into the river, swirling away from me, everything I had ever been or ever wanted to be. I couldn't get my breath. I couldn't stay afloat. I couldn't tell which way to swim. A hallucination, I suppose, but it was as real as anything I would ever feel. I saw my parents calling to me from the far shoreline. I saw my brother and sister and all the townsfolk, the mayor and the entire Chamber of Commerce, and my old teacher and girlfriends and high school buddies. Like some weird sporting event, everybody screaming from the sidelines, rooting me on. A loud stadium roar, hot dogs and popcorn, the stadium smells, stadium heat. A squad of cheerleaders did cartwheels along the banks of the rainy river. They had megaphones and pom-poms and small brown thighs. The crowd swayed left and right. A marching band played the fight song. All my aunts and uncles were there, and Abraham Lincoln, and St. George, and a 9-year-old girl named Linda who had died of a brain tumor back in 5th grade, and several members of the United States Senate, and a blind poet scribbling notes, and LBG, and Huck Finn, and Abby Goffman, and all the dead soldiers back from the grave, villagers with terrible burns, little kids without arms or legs, and the many thousands who were later to die. Yes, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were there, and a couple of popes, and the first lieutenant named Jimmy Cross, and the last surviving veteran of the American Civil War, and Jane Fonda dressed up as Barbarella, and an old man sprawled beside a pigeon pen, and my grandfather, and Gary Cooper, and a kind-faced woman carrying an umbrella and a copy of Plato's Republica, and a million ferocious citizens waving flags of all shapes and colors. People in hard hats, people in headbands. They were all whooping and chanting and urging me towards one shore or the other. I saw faces from my distant past and distant future. My wife was there. My unborn daughter waved at me, and my 2 sons hopped up and down, and a drill sergeant named Blyton sneered and shot up a finger and shook his head. There was a choir of bright purple robes. There was a cabbie from the Bronx. There was a slim young man I would one day kill with a hand grenade along a red clay trail outside the village of Maikee. It was as if there was an audience to my life. That swirl of faces along the river, and in my head, I could hear the people screaming at me. "Traitor," they yelled. "Turncoat, pussy." I felt myself blush. I couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't endure the mockery, or the disgrace, or the patriotic ridicule, even in my imagination. The shore was just 20 yards away. I couldn't make myself be brave. It had nothing to do with morality. Embarrassment. That's all it was. And right then I submitted. I would go to war. I would kill people and maybe die because I was too embarrassed not to. That was the sad thing. And so I sat in the bow of the boat and cried. It was loud now. Loud, hard crying. Elroy Beardoll remained quiet. He kept fishing. He worked his line with the tip of his fingers, patiently squinting out at his red and white bobber on the rainy river. His eyes were flat and impassive. He didn't speak. He was simply there, like the river and the late summer sun, and yet, by his presence, his mute watchfulness, he made it real. He was the true audience. He was a witness, like God, or like the gods, who look on in absolute silence as we live our lives, as we make our choices or fail to make them. "Ain't biting," he said. Then, after a time, the old man pulled up his line and turned the boat back towards Minnesota.